The subway car rattled along the tracks, its dim yellow lights flickering with every bump in the tunnel. Roman Reigns leaned back against the metal pole near the door. His broad shoulders made the narrow space feel even smaller. And the hoodie he wore did little to hide his powerful frame. His cap was pulled low, shadowing his face. Roman was grateful for the noise and chaos of the subway. It gave him the one thing he hadn't felt in a long time: anonymity. The scent of old leather, grease, and faint traces of spilled coffee filled the car. Roman let out a quiet sigh. He'd been riding the subway for weeks now, enjoying the simplicity of it. No fans, no cameras, just people going about their day. To them, he was just another guy in a hoodie, another face in the crowd. Roman's sharp eyes scanned the passengers. Across from him, a young woman scrolled on her phone, earbuds jammed in her ears. Two teenage boys whispered to each other near the middle of the car, their laughter carrying over the hum of the train. A man in a crisp suit typed furiously on his laptop, oblivious to everything around him. When the train screeched to a stop at the next station, a handful of new passengers shuffled in. Among them was an elderly woman. She wore a faded green coat, the kind that had seen many winters. Her hands gripped the straps of a large, overstuffed bag that seemed far too heavy for her frail frame. She moved slowly, her eyes scanning the car for an empty seat. Roman's heart ached as he watched her. She looked tired, her wrinkled face lined with quiet determination. She paused near a row of young passengers, but none of them moved. A teenage boy leaned against the window, pretending not to see her. The young woman with the earbuds didn't even glance up. The woman sighed softly, clutching her bag tighter as she tried to find her balance in the swaying car. Roman straightened, ready to offer her his spot near the pole, when someone else stepped forward. A young man in a black hoodie blocked her path. His movements were sharp, full of restless energy. Roman recognized the type instantly, a troublemaker looking for attention. "Move it, Granny," the man said, loud enough for the entire car to hear. The woman froze, her wide eyes darting up to him. "Excuse me?" she said softly, trying to step around him. But the man wasn't finished. He shifted to block her again, his smirk growing wider. "What you got in that bag, huh? Rocks? Bricks?" He let out a loud, mocking laugh. "You moving your whole house or what?" A few passengers chuckled nervously, while others quickly looked away, pretending they didn't hear. Roman's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists inside his hoodie. He stayed still, watching, waiting to see if anyone else would step in. The man leaned closer to the elderly woman. "You don't need that seat, do you? Why don't you just stand? Better for your old bones, right?" The woman opened her mouth to reply, but her words caught in her throat. The man suddenly reached out and tugged at her bag. "Let me help you with that, Grandma," he sneered, pulling it from her grip. The bag hit the floor with a loud thud. The woman gasped, stumbling back into a metal pole. Her hand reached out to steady herself, her eyes filling with tears. Roman Traus had seen enough. He straightened to his full height, his broad frame towering over the rest of the passengers. His deep voice cut through the tense air like a blade. "Put the bag down." The man turned, his smirk faltering as he looked up at Roman. For a moment, the subway car fell silent. All eyes were on them. "Who are you?" "Her bodyguard," the man scoffed, though his voice shook slightly. He squared his shoulders, trying to match Roman's intimidating presence. "Mind your business, bro." Roman took a step closer, his dark eyes locked on the man. "I said, put it down." The man hesitated, glancing around the car for support. But the laughter was gone now. The other passengers watched in uneasy silence, their phones clutched tightly in their hands. Some had started recording, the faint glow of their screens casting shadows on their faces. Roman didn't care. He took another step forward, his voice dropping to a growl. "You want to test me?" The man swallowed, hard. He bent down, picked up the bag, and tossed it back toward the elderly woman. It slid across the floor, stopping at her feet. "Fine. Whatever," he muttered. It was just a joke. "Apologize," Roman demanded, his voice steady and firm. The man's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me," Roman said, his eyes narrowing. "Say you're sorry." The man glared at him, his bravado cracking under the weight of Roman's stare. "Sorry," he mumbled, barely above a whisper. "Louder!" Roman barked. "I said I'm sorry," the man snapped, throwing his hands up. Roman's gaze didn't waver. "Now, sit down." The man hesitated, his fists clenching at his sides. But when Roman took another step forward, he dropped into the nearest seat, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. Roman turned to the elderly woman. She had already picked up her bag, holding it close to her chest. Tears glistened in her eyes as she looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Roman gave her a small nod. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her hands still shook. "I'll be fine. Thanks to you." Roman stepped back, his heart still pounding in his chest. The tension in the car slowly began to ease. A few passengers exchanged quiet glances. Some put their phones away, while others kept recording, their cameras trained on Roman. The subway slowed as it pulled into the next station. The man in the hoodie jumped up and bolted out the doors as soon as they opened, not daring to look back. Roman leaned against the pole again, pulling his hoodie lower over his face. He could feel the eyes of the passengers on him. Whispers filled the air, hushed but unmistakable. "Isn't that Roman Reigns? No way. Is it really him?" A teenage boy near the back of the car stared at Roman, his mouth slightly open. He raised his phone, angling it toward him. Roman sighed. He turned his head slightly, avoiding the camera. He didn't want this. He hadn't stepped in to be a hero or to get attention. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. But as the subway doors closed and the train lurched forward again, Roman knew it was already too late. Somewhere out there, his face was probably already on a dozen screens. By the time he reached his stop, the world would know what happened. By the time Roman Reigns stepped off the subway at his stop, he could already feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. The train hissed shut behind him and rattled away into the darkness, leaving him on the platform. He adjusted his hoodie, pulling it lower over his face. His goal had been simple when he got on the train: blend in, disappear, enjoy a rare moment of peace. Now, that peace was gone. As he climbed the station steps into the cold evening air, his phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. Roman hesitated, taking a moment to steel himself before pulling it out. His notifications were a flood: texts from friends, calls from his manager, and social media apps lighting up with more alerts than he could count. He unlocked his phone and opened his messages. The first text caught his eye. "Dude, you're all over the internet. Did you seriously stop a robbery on a subway? Call me!" Roman exhaled sharply. Jimmy and Jay, his cousins, were always the first to text when something blew up. He didn't even need to check Twitter to know what was happening. But curiosity got the better of him. Opening the app, his worst fear was confirmed. He tapped on one of the videos circulating the platform. There he was, towering over the man in the hoodie, his voice commanding, his presence filling the small subway car. Someone had captured the entire moment, from the elderly woman's trembling hands to the man's sheepish apology. The comments were pouring in faster than he could read them. Roman Reigns just saved an old lady on a train? The tribal chief is a real-life hero. This is why he's the GOAT. Respect Roman. Not just a WWE champion, he's a champion in real life, too. Roman locked his phone and shoved it back into his pocket. He didn't do it for the likes or the comments. He didn't need anyone's applause. But now, the world was watching. There would be interviews, headlines, hashtags. People would pick apart the story, twisting it into whatever narrative suited them. He turned a corner, walking briskly toward his apartment. He needed to think, to figure out how to handle this. As he reached the front door, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was his manager, Cade. Roman sighed and answered. "Yeah?" "Roman!" Cade's voice was loud and buzzing, with energy. "Man, I can't believe this. The video's got over 3 million views already, and it's only been up for an hour. TMZ's running it. ESPN wants to talk to you. Even CNN's reaching out. Do you know what this means?" Roman stepped inside his apartment, locking the door behind him. "I don't care," he said flatly, kicking off his shoes. "What do you mean you don't care?" Cade sounded like he was choking. "This is huge! You're not just a wrestler anymore, you're a hero. People are calling you the modern-day Superman." Roman dropped onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "I'm not a hero, Cade. I just did what anyone should have done." Cade paused on the other end of the line. "Yeah, but here's the thing. Nobody else did. That's why people are losing their minds over this. You stood up when no one else would. You've got to ride this wave, man. We could do interviews, partner with charities." Roman cut him off. "No, no," Cade repeated, incredulous. "Roman, this is the kind of publicity people dream of. You're already trending worldwide. If we—" "I said no." Roman's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "This isn't about me. It's about what happened to that woman. The story isn't mine to tell." Cade sighed. "Look, I get it. You don't want to make this about you, but the world's already decided that it is. If you don't say something, they'll just fill in the blanks for you. Trust me, you don't want that." Roman ended the call without replying. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling as his phone continued to buzz. For years, he'd been in the spotlight, and he'd learned how to handle it. But this was different. This wasn't about his career or his persona in the ring. This was real life. The next morning, Roman woke to his phone vibrating like a jackhammer on the nightstand. He groaned, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and grabbed it. The notifications had only multiplied. He scrolled through the headlines. Roman Reigns stands tall. WWE superstar stops subway attack. The tribal chief goes viral for real-life heroics. Roman Reigns confronts subway bully, becomes internet icon. He sighed, tossing the phone onto the bed. Despite his efforts to stay quiet, the story had taken on a life of its own. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted a piece of him. After pulling on a fresh hoodie and jeans, Roman headed to a nearby coffee shop. He kept his cap low as he ordered his usual blacks, coffee, hoping to slip in and out unnoticed. But as he waited at the counter, he could feel the stares. "Excuse me," a soft voice said from behind him. Roman turned to see a teenage girl clutching her phone. Her hands trembled as she held it up. Are you Roman Reigns?" Roman hesitated, then nodded. The girl's eyes widened, and she smiled nervously. I just wanted to say what you did was amazing. My grandma watches you on TV every week, and when I showed her the video, she cried. She said, "You're a real hero." Roman managed a small smile. "Tell her I said thank you." The girl beamed. Can I get a picture?" He sighed but nodded, crouching slightly so she could snap a selfie. As soon as the camera clicked, he excused himself, grabbed his coffee, and left. The moment was kind, genuine even, but it still left him feeling heavy. Later that day, Roman's phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was from a name he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer but changed his mind at the last second. "Hello? Mr. Rains?" The voice was soft, careful. "My name is Emily Parker. I'm a reporter with the local news." Roman groaned inwardly. "I'm not interested in interviews." "I understand," Emily said quickly, "but this isn't about you. I've been speaking with Dorothy Henderson, the woman from the subway." Roman's breath caught. "She's okay?" "She's fine," Emily assured him. "She just wanted me to pass along a message. She said to tell you, thank you, and that she hopes you're not letting all this attention get to you. She said, and I quote, 'He just did what was right. The world could use more people like that.'" Roman leaned back against the wall, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "She's a strong lady." "She is," Emily agreed. She also mentioned that if you ever wanted to tell your side of the story, your way, we'd love to help you do that. No pressure. Roman thought for a moment. Maybe Cade was right. Maybe it was time to speak up, not for himself but for Dorothy, and for everyone else who had ever been in her shoes. "All right," Roman said finally. "Let's do it." Roman sat at his kitchen table, his phone resting on the smooth wooden surface. The midday sun poured through the window, bathing the room in a golden glow. But Roman's mind was focused. Across from him sat Emily Parker, the reporter who'd reached out. She wasn't what Roman had expected. No flashy equipment, no pushy questions, just a notepad, a small camera, and a calm, patient demeanor. "This is your story to tell, Roman," Emily said, her pen poised over the paper. "I'm here to help you get your message out, but it's all on your terms." Roman nodded, his large hands clasped together. "I appreciate that. This isn't about me. It never was." Emily smiled gently. "I understand. Whenever you're ready." Roman leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. He took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts, then began to speak. The interview was simple. Emily kept the questions light, letting Roman guide the narrative. He talked about what happened on the subway, how he'd been just another passenger, hoping for a quiet ride. He described the moment he saw Dorothy struggling, the man harassing her, and how no one else stepped up. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," Roman said, his voice steady but firm. "I just couldn't sit there and do nothing. That woman needed help, and it was the right thing to do." Emily nodded, encouraging him to continue. "What do you hope people take away from this, Roman?" Roman's expression hardened slightly, his eyes narrowing with conviction. "I hope people stop watching and start doing. It's easy to stand by, pull out your phone, and think, 'It's not my problem.' But that kind of thinking helps no one. We all have a choice, to act or to look away. I chose to act." The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Emily looked up from her notepad, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think this kind of moment changes people?" Roman leaned back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest. "I think it can. I've seen the response. People are talking about it, sharing their own stories. That's a start. But words aren't enough. Change happens when people take action. even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable. Emily smiled, nodding. Powerful words. And Dorothy? How is she doing? Roman's face softened. She's strong. Stronger than most people I know. She told me something that stuck with me. She said, "Sometimes you just need one person to remind you that you're not invisible." That's what this is about. Seeing people, standing up for them, and reminding them they matter. The interview wrapped up with Emily thanking Roman for his time. As she packed up her things, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think your message is going to inspire a lot of people." Roman nodded. "I hope so." Later that evening, Roman's phone buzzed with a notification. Emily had published the interview, uploading it as a short, unedited video. Roman hesitated before tapping the link, unsure if he was ready to see the world's reaction. The video started with his face filling the screen, his voice calm but resolute. Watching himself speak felt strange, but as the video played on, he noticed something else. The comments. Thousands of them poured in, most echoing the same sentiment. "This is the kind of leadership we need. Respect, Roman." He's right. We all need to do better. Don't just watch, do. This is a lesson for all of us. As Roman scrolled, he saw stories from people who'd been inspired to take action in their own lives. A teacher who stood up for a bullied student. A neighbor who defended a family being harassed. Small acts of courage, but significant ones. For the first time since the incident, Roman felt a sense of peace. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about the message, the movement, the change it could spark. The next morning, Roman went for a walk through the city. The streets were bustling as usual, the air filled with the sounds of honking cars and chatter. He kept his hoodie up, his head low, but every so often, someone would recognize him. A man in a suit gave him a quiet nod. A woman, pushing a stroller, whispered, "Thank you." Roman didn't stop for pictures or conversations. He didn't need to. The impact of his actions was already out there, rippling through the lives of people he'd never met. When he reached a quiet park, Roman sat on a bench and watched as kids played on the swings. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't check it. The world was watching, but for now, Roman was content to sit back and let the story unfold on its own. Roman's message spread far and wide, inspiring others to take action in their own communities. But what started as one act of courage was only the beginning. The world had seen his strength, but now it was time for the people to find their own. Click on the screen to watch the next video and see how one act of bravery leads to a chain of events that no one could have predicted.